How does this affect me? They see that the elites who ruined their lives hate Trump. Corporate America hates Trump. Wall Street hates Trump. The career politicians hate Trump. The media hates Trump after they loved him and created him, and now hate him. Thank you, media. The enemy of my enemy.
In the midst of the severely polarized political landscape in the United States of America and the competing streams of information, the well-known documentary filmmaker and political commentator Michael Moore has emerged as one of the most steadfast critics from the Rust Belt. Moore has stepped into the spotlight of live television. He has seen a New York real estate mogul come to the land of forgotten workers and sell them a dose of hope that he knew full well was nothing more than a via sarat, has been nurtured and perfected over many years, long before he ever set foot in the Oval Office. He did not just take advantage of fake news, he has seen something like this happen. He was one of the people that came up with it. Conspiracy served as the basis for all that could be considered subsequent. It demonstrated that a lie that was sufficiently bold and repeated frequently enough might penetrate deeply into the minds of millions of people. With this action, the legitimacy of the nation's first black president was called into question, and the very foundation of democracy was sown with seeds of uncertainty. On top of that, the entire character that the general public recognizes as Trump is also the result of lies. The fall of Atlantic City casinos that had gone bankrupt served as the foundation for the urban legend of the business genius. Rallies were the source of creating the image of the man who represents the people. During the time that he was flying back to his penthouse with gold plating, he was successful in successfully selling an image that even his supporters yearned for.
Fake news that he's one of the founders of in the Obama era.
So
he created the fake news of the
Barack Obama is not a citizen,
and he said that there was intelligence.
That's right. He was called by a reputable
source that there was intelligence. Right. He himself was going to. He was hiring investigators.
Yes.
To support his fake news.
In fact,
he is the godfather of this decade's fake news.
This is
for him now to say fake news.
The news. It was a wonderful expression of his contempt. Through his actions, he transformed himself into a victim, a solitary hero who fought against the world. The belief was shared by millions. They failed to recognize that the individual whom they praised was in fact the precise personification of the elite that they professed to loathe. An ever-increasing level of hypocrisy was displayed. Those who voted for the President of the United States of America were so devoted to him that they didn't even believe in the fundamental ideals he espoused.
It's not a proud day for this country. How could it be a proud day when a man who was not elected by the people becomes president of the United States? How does that happen? Listen, the man is a malignant narcissist. All right? That's a dangerous combination to have a narcissist like that who's elected to public office, because he's only thinking about himself. He's only thinking, how does this affect me?
The purpose of this truth is to attract the steadfastness of his supporters. As the foundation of lies began to disintegrate, they voted for a cultural warrior, but instead they got a New York Democrat clothed as a MAGA Republican through the election process. Anxiety began to creep in. Trump was incapable of facing the truth, so he attempted to manipulate it by fabricating a reality in which the team that was defeated ended up being victorious.
You know, when whoever has the most points wins, right? Tottenham 2, Chelsea 1. Who won that game? I'm just asking you, factually. Who won that game?
In that case, Tottenham.
Tottenham won. All right? Now, how odd would it be if you, on the news that night, said, Chelsea won today with one goal and Tottenham got 2?
But what are you going to do about it?
This makes no sense.
The folly of Trump's claims regarding the election was demonstrated to the world by Moore through the use of a straightforward football analogy. As a result of his ability to convert a complicated political issue into a joke, the narcissist was completely shattered. Once the general public understood that they had been taken advantage of and duped, it was inevitable that they would get angry.
Because when he starts to cause harm to our fellow Americans, people are going to rise up. They're not going to take this. They're not going to take it from a guy that did not get a majority of the votes of the people of this country. So, you know, and his thin skin, too, could be his undoing.
Might prove to be his undoing. That rebellion was taking place in more places than just the streets. It was happening in the minds of individuals who formerly believed that every falsehood that was uncovered and every selfish behavior that was laid naked was another breach in the wall of support. While the media circus continues to play out every day, the true harm that will last is being done behind the scenes in silence. On the surface, the pandemonium is nothing more than smoke and mirrors that are being used to conceal a systematic attack on the institutions of the United States.
These days, Donald Trump is very busy doing a whole bunch of other things that we're not paying attention to. Today, Donald Trump's EPA did something that will suffer from years from now that we don't even know right now. His Interior Department sold off land of ours to people that shouldn't have it. His agricultural part, I mean, just go down all the cabinet departments. Every day there is something going on, and we are very caught up in the large things that he's doing, threatening North Korea, refusing to acknowledge what happened this weekend, what really happened. And I just want to be the one to point out that take this horror moment that we're in and times it by 20, times it by 200. That's what's going on in every federal agency under his control every single day.
This is also the legacy that is the most harmful. Protections against pollution of the air and water were eliminated. Companies involved in mining were able to purchase public land. The scientists were unable to speak. The people of the United States will, for many generations to come, be the ones to bear the consequences of this covert damage. For the sake of the short-term profits of corporations and the ego of a single individual, they will breathe dirtier air and drink more water that has been subjected to contamination. All of this transpired for a single, straightforward reason. Trump is a well-known figure on television. He was not selling policy, rather he was selling a narrative and an emotion.
None of what he said was true, but that didn't matter. He knew how to communicate to the American public. He knew how to tell them what they wanted to hear. He went all over Wisconsin the last week saying, I'm gonna make you all rich. I'm gonna make you all rich. You're gonna make you all rich. Well, geez, who wouldn't like to hear that, right? Right, ma'am, how do I look tonight? How do I look? What would you say? Amazing, thank you. I don't know whether that's true or not, but it really made me feel good. And that's how he worked, right? He knew how to do it because he was a TV star.
Values that he gained from participating in the apprentice program were invaluable to him. Over the course of more than a decade, he constructed a false image of a decisive leader, a financial genius, and someone who could easily handle any problem. However, this was nothing more than a veneer for a narcissist who had absolutely no experience of politics.
He was already a beloved American TV star. Do you realize in the first year, I'm talking about The Apprentice, by the way, the looks on your face, you know. He was the host of a show called The Apprentice. How many people in here watch The Apprentice every week when Donald Trump was on? Can I see a show of 1, 2, 3, 4 in the balcony? Oh my God. You realize that his first year on the air, on some of those shows, that first season, he had over 40 million viewers. Last week on TV, the largest rated show was America's Got Talent. Not ironically titled, by the way, it's a real show. It had 13.1 million viewers. He had 40 million people watching this. And I realized, I guess this isn't that crowd. But I want to tell you, in between the Hudson River and La Cienega Boulevard, there are a lot of people that loved him because he knew how to keep it simple, stupid, right?
A political forum with 40 million viewers was something that no politician could ever hope to achieve. It was not necessary for him to convince voters. All that was required of him was to bring to life a figure that they were already familiar with and cherish. As part of his reality television show, he incorporated politics into yet another season. The promises he made were always straightforward and uncomplicated, and they were aimed squarely at the anxieties and aspirations of his audience. It was not necessary for him to provide specific plans. It was sufficient for him to make a courageous and steadfast commitment. A Trump, Donald.
Donald Trump came to the Detroit Economic Club and stood there in front of the Ford Motor executives and said, if you close these factories as you're planning to do in Detroit and build them in Mexico, I'm going to put a 35% tariff on those cars when you send them back, and nobody's going to buy them. It was an amazing thing to see. No politician, Republican or Democrat, had ever said anything like that to these executives. And it was music to the ears of people in Michigan and Ohio and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, the Brexit states.
It did not matter to the states that voted to leave the EU whether or not that pledge was ever fulfilled. What was important was the feeling that it gave, which was that at long last, someone had the courage to stand up against those who were considered to be powerful. President Trump viewed it as a product that would gain support, and he was able to sell it with great success. Even when confronted with extreme legal repercussions, the attention continued to be directed toward the spectacle. Impeachments and prosecutions were merely the most recent episodes in a series that never seemed to end and would never end altogether.
You believe there is a chance that Trump could be convicted by the Senate? We will take care of it.
Weirdly enough, I am that kind of optimist that believes that of the 53 Republicans, Trump can keep the majority, 33 of them in support of him. I believe that there are 20 Republicans who could possibly vote to remove him. That could happen. There's a sliver of a chance if the John Bolton testimony shows people what else is there besides the Ukrainian phone.
A formula. However, in the end, a single moment of truth on television from Michael Moore had a significantly greater impact than months of testimony brought forth by the court system. Moore's performance on television did something that no prosecution could do. It made Trump appear insignificant and pitiful. For someone like Melania, who had invested her entire reputation in her husband's brilliance, this was an agonizing blow. She was not angry because of political issues. The story was about the disintegration of an illusion that had been meticulously crafted. The nation continues to be engulfed in darkness, where the concept of truth has become relative and where conflict has become the norm. Right now, the United States of America is confronted with an uncertain future in which the entire basis of its existence has been questioned.
Donald Trump is not simply facing political opposition, he is being crushed under the weight of his own design. The illusion is cracking. His scandals, financial, sexual, criminal, are converging in real time. The old tricks, they're not working anymore.
Wolf, a seasoned economist and ardent critic of capitalism, made these statements not as a partisan opponent, but rather as an observer who has been following Donald Trump for decades. When Wolf examines the structures of power, he considers Trump to be an example of a structure that is constructed on sand. Over the course of several years, Trump has constructed a political brand that is not centered on policy, but rather on spectacle. He has shaped the facts to suit his demands and has bent reality with each broadcast. From the Trump University fraud case, which cost him $25 million, to the forced dissolution of the Trump Foundation after it was exposed as operating with a shocking pattern of illegality, the illusion of the untouchable billionaire businessman who alone would make America great again is now collapsing dramatically. Now the Trump Foundation is being forced to dissolve after it was exposed as operating with a shocking pattern of illegality. The warning indicators were always present, but they were unable to be heard because of the cacophony of campaign rallies and the gloss and glamour caused by the presidency. These issues are hardly isolated in today's world. After putting together a complete picture, the United States of America is now living in the aftermath of a government that is run like a reality television show.
That's the real story. And here is where the economic lesson begins. When a figure like Trump builds his brand on fraud, spectacle, and distraction, the fallout isn't personal, it's structural. What we are witnessing is the unraveling of not just a political figure, but an entire ideology rooted in spectacle over substance, ego over policy, and cruelty over governance.
In the event that we are able to even refer to it as an ideology, Trumpism was never a political philosophy. The organization was a personality cult in which allegiance to a single individual took precedence over principles, laws, and even the objective facts. The direction of foreign policy was determined by tweets sent at 3 a.m. Personal grudges played a significant role in shaping economic decisions. Being cruel was not a defect, it was a distinguishing trait. The policy of separating families at the border, which has left an indelible moral mark on this nation, was not the result of a simple administrative mistake. It was a conscious decision to employ suffering as a method of policy making, and the structural repercussions of this strategy are now indisputable. The United States of America is more divided than it has ever been since the Civil War. The trust that people have in fundamental institutions such as elections, the judicial system, and the press has been steadily undermined. The percentage of Americans who believe that the country is moving in the right direction is only 19%. When trust in democracy goes below 50%, we are no longer talking about party politics. Only 47% of people feel that our elections follow fair procedures. Presently, the democratic system in the United States is in the midst of an existential crisis.
For the first time, the American public is no longer looking away. Atlas Central, one of the most accurate pollsters of 2024, shows Democrats leading Republicans 51% to 43%. That's not just a statistical difference. That's a collapse of confidence in Trump's ability to deliver. Even conservative-leaning Ipsos has his approval sinking to 41%. Other polls place him deep in the 30s. That's a death knell in electoral politics.
Are not only random data points, they are signs that a nation is exhausted overall. The first indication that the so-called red wave did not materialize was the midterm examination in 2022. The candidates that Trump supported, ranging from Mehmet Oz in Pennsylvania to Kari Lake in Arizona, were unsuccessful. They were not providing any policies. They continued to spread false information regarding the election in 2020. And even Trump's once solid support bases started to weaken. Voters from the white working class who do not have college degrees and who supported him in large numbers in states such as Ohio and Pennsylvania are now divided. They are being squeezed by rising food prices, job automation, and court appearances that have replaced promises to make America great. Gallup found that by the second quarter of 2025, confidence in the president among Americans with moderate incomes had dropped below 36%, marking the lowest level since the beginning of his presidency. While his political legacy may be called into doubt, the economic legacy that he left behind is becoming more apparent, and it is not a positive one. Then let's
shift focus to the economy, a subject Trump claims as his strong suit. But here's the truth. His policies are sabotaging the very economy he brags about.
Trump ran for office as the master negotiator, the business-savvy billionaire who would bring prosperity to workers. However, his signature economic policy, the trade war, did the opposite. It was touted as a way to punish China and bring manufacturing back, but it turned out to be a tax that was paid directly out of the wallets of American consumers and businesses.
We are watching inflation explode, commodity prices spike, and consumers squeezed harder than ever. Why? Because tariffs are taxes. They're not paid by foreign countries. They're paid by American consumers and businesses.
Is a basic truth of economics that the Trump administration ignored. A National Bureau of Economic Research (NBR) study confirmed it. American companies and consumers bore nearly the full cost of the tariffs. Everything from washing machines to steel experienced a sharp increase in price. The groceries went up in price. Small businesses struggled with higher import costs.
The average price of ground beef in the U.S. has surged to over $6 per pound beef steak, up over 8% in a single year.
American farmers, who were once the foundation of Trump's coalition, were dealt the most severe blow when China retaliated by imposing tariffs on American commodities. China's actions resulted in the disappearance of the largest market for American soybeans virtually overnight. Given the magnitude of the destruction, the administration made a hasty effort to fill the void by providing emergency farm aid in the amount of $65 billion, which was distributed by the government through the so-called One Big Beautiful Bill Act. Not only was it a bailout, but it was also an unsaid acknowledgement that their own policies had unintended consequences for the same people they had promised to stand up for.
We are now living through the consequences of an administration that substituted economic understanding with slogans, trade wars, and egomania. When you raise tariffs on imports, two things happen. And while Trump clings to his cult of personality, the rest of us are left holding the bill.
The lofty promise of an industrial renaissance did not materialize to the extent that was anticipated. According to Richard Wolff, who said it in a straightforward manner, this trade war was never really about factories or employment. It had to do with the theater.
This isn't economic nationalism. This is economic self-harm. And let me say this clearly, Trump doesn't understand economics. In the end, these tariffs are not about jobs or patriotism. They are about vengeance, distraction, and power.
In the face of the collapse of his political and economic foundations, Trump shifted his focus to the one area in which he had always felt he could prevail: the courtroom. However, even over there, the protective walls are beginning to collapse.
Just recently, Trump lost a major case against Bob Woodward. Trump sued the legendary journalist and publisher Simon & Schuster, claiming copyright ownership over the recordings of his own voice. He argued absurdly that he had a right to control how his words were published. A Republican-appointed judge shut it down, and that ruling isn't just a legal defeat, it's a symbolic one.
Despite its peculiar nature, the action is really a small part of a much broader legal tempest. He was determined to be responsible for sexual abuse and slander by juries in the state of New York, and they awarded him approximately $90 million in damages. Additionally, 88 criminal accusations were brought against him in 4 separate cases, which is an unparalleled legal reality for any former president of the United States. He and his firm were penalized nearly $500 million for systemic financial fraud when another judge ruled against them.
This legal earthquake tells us something crucial. Trump is not fighting for power anymore, he's fighting for survival.
The self-inflicted wound that is the $10 billion lawsuit against Rupert Murdoch, the very media magnate whose Fox News empire made Trump's political career possible, is an example of how Trump's desperation is now manifesting itself in his attacks on once powerful supporters. It is the action of a man who finds himself in a corner, striking at anyone who refuses to give his complete commitment. The idea that he is unbeatable is beginning to fall apart.
Because in a functioning democracy, no one, no matter how wealthy, famous, or politically connected, should be above the law. That was the myth Trump sold his base, that he was untouchable, that he would dismantle the deep state before it could touch him.
He is. And today, that myth is not only breaking apart, but it is breaking apart under oath in courtrooms all over the country. Not with a resounding bang, but without a doubt. Testimony under oath and decisions that expose the hidden truth about the situation. As the very legal system that Trump once believed he owned is now throwing his demands into the shredder one indictment at a time. The illusion of invincibility is beginning to break, just like one of his casinos did in the 1990s. A visible toll is being taken on the man himself as a result of the combined pressures of politics, economics, and the law. The image of the tough guy who never backs down is disintegrating in front of the eyes of the public.
These are not isolated incidents. They are symptoms of a culture that protects the wealthy and powerful from accountability. A system where billionaires can associate with traffickers and abusers and face no consequences until the truth spills out so violently that it can't be ignored anymore. That moment is now.
Presently. A comprehensive diagnosis of a political sickness that is afflicting the United States of America has been presented by Richard Wolff. This disease ranges from empty economic promises that have led to an increase in the cost of living to the legal unmasking of the invincibility myth reality is finally making its way back into the spotlight. Despite the fact that Trump's political dynasty is falling apart under the weight of its own lies, the fissures that it has caused in the basis of the American Republic will take years to mend. The future of our nation is now contingent on whether or not it is able to overcome the divisions that have existed and rebuild, this time on a foundation of accuracy.
I admit I may not have spent as much time in a courtroom as you have.
That's a good one.
I was also recognized with a Special Achievement Award by the Department of Justice. You remember the Department of Justice, right? It's the agency that's been pursuing you for decades. And like Madam Vice President Kamala Harris, I've had a history of prosecuting sex offenders.
A performance is taking place on the stage of the Vista, which is brightly lit. Sunny Hostin, a former federal prosecutor, did not waste any time on polite discourse. Rather, she was there to give a public decision. Donald Trump is obsessed with Sunny Hostin, and he cannot stop himself from feeling obsessed with her. The legal issues that Trump is facing are not unique. The Department of Justice filed a lawsuit against his family in the 1970s, alleging that they had discriminated against them in housing. Hostin has just condensed 40 years of scandal into a few cutting lines, the highlight of which is a barb at his mugshot, which has become a symbol of the twisted nature of the Fulton County Jail. Following the discussion of Trump's awful legal position, the debate went to a topic that was even more delicate: the icy marriage between Melania Trump and Donald Trump. Trump has been using it to collect money, turning his embarrassment into some weird badge of pride.
I think she hates him.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Okay, so we can all
That's a
agree on
given.
that. That's a given. I also think that she wants to take him out. She does not want to be the first lady anymore.
They agree with you.
She doesn't want to be the first lady. She destroyed the Rose Garden. Who hates Christmas? Melania Trump hates Christmas. She doesn't want to decorate for Christmas. She doesn't want anything
She
to
doesn't
do with
care
him.
about that.
She doesn't want to sleep in the same room with him. She can't tolerate him.
Allegedly.
And she doesn't.
Yeah, how do you know all this?
Yeah, I don't know.
You don't know.
Through the use of this criticism, the First Lady is transformed from a public figure into a political prisoner within the confines of her own marriage. Those instances when she smacked Trump's hand away on camera, the forced grins, and most memorably that jacket with the words "I truly don't care," are all actions that are interpreted as acts of defiance. Every single one of her movements is interpreted as a kind of defiance. During her visit to children who are being held in detention, all of this is considered to be a form of coded communication. The First Lady of the United States has traditionally been responsible for bolstering and enhancing the image of the president throughout the course of human history. Melania is not like other people. She used her reticence and icy manner as a political weapon throughout the entire process. It was when Melania herself took the political scene that this familial conflict reached its pinnacle. She did not do so in order to support her husband, but rather to subtly undercut one of his most cherished accomplishments. During the time when President Trump was traveling across the country and boasting about the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade and give states the authority to prohibit abortion, his wife released a promotional video for her biography that had words that were completely in opposition to what he was trying to convey.
You are aware of.
You know who has been bragging all over the campaign trail about how he's the one that overturned Roe v. Wade, but apparently his wife has different thoughts on the reproductive rights after posting this video plugging her memoir. Take a look.
Individual freedom is a fundamental principle that I safeguard. Without a doubt, there is no room for compromise when it comes to this essential right that all women possess from birth: individual freedom. What does my body, my choice really mean?
The conflict is as transparent as it could possibly be. It was the vocabulary of the pro-choice movement, personal freedom, and other similar movements that she employed challenged the legacy of her husband's opposition to abortion. Not only was there turmoil within the Trump family, but there was also a political civil war going on within the family. Republican candidates were penalized in the midterm elections of 2022 by women and independent voters as a result of the impact from the overturning of Roe v. Wade, which was a disaster for the Republican Party. Essentially, it was a press release that was disguised as a promotional film for a memoir. And it was a ticking time bomb that was dropped right at Trump's feet. Melania Trump's choice brought attention to the fact that Trump is deeply vulnerable on this fundamental subject. Due to the fact that Trump's personality is a combination of constant victimhood and the swagger of a billionaire, he is an easy target. However, he spends a significant portion of his time talking about how unfairly he has been treated, despite the fact that he established his brand on winning and success.
It's him!
He's just this crybaby with this complex of victimhood, right? Here he is, this billionaire, supposedly this, that. All he does is bitch and moan and complain and whine and nag.
He's a very small man.
This man is little. This is the method that Trump employs, which is to construct every accusation and every failure as evidence of a massive conspiracy against him. He is the unending victim of the deep state's fake news and the never-ending witch hunts that are directed on his supporters, which causes the rest of the world to feel compassion for him. What a terrible show it is to have a president who can't stop complaining about things. The history of the United States presidency is replete with leaders who demonstrated resiliency in the face of hardship, but Trump opted to play the role of the martyr. Another stain on his legacy is the fact that he did not disclose any information. It was a clear indication of his disdain for fundamental accountability that he refused to provide his personal financial records, which was a tradition that had been in place for decades.
Send that clip. Every president provides their birth certificate. No, they don't, but do you know what they do provide? They provide their taxes and their medical records. And that is something that he lost track of.
The picture of someone who had anything to conceal was created as a result of that reluctance. When portions of his tax documents were ultimately made public, they verified the worst possible scenario: a self-proclaimed millionaire who paid a lower amount of taxes than regular employed people. An administration that was predicated on secrecy and deception was characterized by this opaqueness, which extended from his finances to his health. The insatiable hunger for power that Trump possesses is unbounded, and nothing demonstrates this more clearly than the fact that he has been discussing a third term, which is a flagrant violation of the Constitution.
Trump was inaugurated, already proposed amending the 22nd Amendment to allow Trump to serve a third term. I think he doesn't want to, he's not going to say that J.D. Vance is a successor because he thinks he's his own successor.
But doesn't that mean that Obama can run also?
Well, you would think so because part of the resolution says no person shall be elected to the office of the president more than 3 times. And the argument is that Trump needs more time to accomplish his agenda and reverse the policies of the Biden administration. Now, it's going to be very hard to do that, to change the 22nd Amendment, which is enshrined in the Constitution. But there are a couple of ways that he could try to get there. He could just try to stay in office. Right?
Office, as you say? The 22nd Amendment was drafted with the express purpose of preventing the kind of power grab that Trump appears to seek. The claim that he simply requires further time is a classic example of the excuse typically used by powerful persons who view democracy as a barrier. It fits into a bigger pattern as well, which is that Trump openly admires authoritarian leaders such as Putin and Kim Jong-un, who are men who never have to worry about bothersome things like free elections. When it comes to the economy, nothing could be further from the truth than Trump's boasting. Despite the fact that he asserts that he is a business genius, his detractors refer to the harsh numbers that are included in a lengthy list of unsuccessful businesses.
U.S. employers cut more jobs, 172,000 jobs last month, than any February since 2009 during the global financial crisis.
In 1930, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives, in an effort to alleviate the effects of the, the Great Depression, passed the, the tariff bill, the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act, which raised or lowered, raised tariffs in an effort to collect more revenue for the federal government. Did it work? Anyone know the effects? It did not work, and the United States sank deeper into the Great Depression.
Continuing to make the same error as the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act, which was one of the most disastrous economic policy decisions in the history of the United States, demonstrates an astounding level of irresponsibility. The trade war that Trump is waging with China has given rise to uncertainty, increased prices for consumers, and caused harm to American industry. In the meantime, the national debt skyrocketed while he was in office. Despite the fact that it was promised, the economic rebirth never occurred. Even education was included in Trump's list of targets for attacks on institutions. The argument put out by critics is that this was a calculated attempt to discredit critical thinking itself.
Look at intent. Why attack the Department of Education? Because if you have an entire country of people that are not educated well, you create a permanent working underclass who can't really make a lot of money because they're not trained to critically think, they're not trained to write well, they're not trained in math. And so I think there's a master plan here, and it's really stressing me out because as you know, I say, for me in particular, education was the great equalizer.
When Betsy DeVos was in charge of the Trump administration, the government promoted policies that were detrimental to public schools and engaged in culture wars on the curriculum in an effort to rewrite history into a phony patriotic narrative that glossed over the painful truths of slavery and racism. The founding of the Pour Out 1776 Commission and attacks on efforts to teach America's complex history were regarded as an attempt to rewrite history. This wasn't just a discussion over the curriculum by any means. The truth of history was being attacked in this way. The administration attempted to coerce schools into teaching a rewritten version of history by threatening to reduce the amount of funds that was provided by the federal government. In situations where the teaching of actual history becomes a threat, it is evident that the objective is not to safeguard education, but rather to safeguard power by controlling the narrative of the nation.
China has accused the United States of blackmail and declared that Beijing would fight to the end. The Canadian Prime Minister, Mark Carney, has said its friendship with the U.S. is over. Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said Trump's tariffs have no basis in logic, are not the act of a friend, and he called them totally unwarranted. Macron from France, he said the tariffs are brutal and unfounded.
Who said this?
And looking at this, and I'm thinking, no country can count on America anymore. They're going to ice us out economically. We're going to be on our own because they're not going to be able to depend on a country that every 4 years could elect a dictator. They can't rely upon
Well,
us.
the problem is the damage in many ways is
on the international stage. The America First agenda that Trump championed was in reality America alone. Pro-Law allies were offended and distanced from the situation. A search for alternatives was initiated by the allies. By disregarding international accords and institutions such as the Paris Climate Accord and NATO, President Trump has damaged the United States' position as the leading global order. As Hostin pointed out, the most significant cause for concern was the escalating instability of the American democracy itself. Everybody throughout the world was uncertain as to whether the next 4 years would bring either a president or an autocrat. He was unrelenting in his assault on a free press, which is one of the fundamental cornerstones of democracy. This was the root cause of all of these difficulties.
The difference between himself and a character like Trump is that he would surround himself with people that knew their positions and knew more than he knows, and then he would learn from them. So the fact that he said he was unqualified doesn't seem to mean to him in his mind that he still can't be president, which I think is a scary proposition because, not only has Trump emboldened people to run for the highest office of the land, he's actually surrounded himself with incompetency. So that is scary to me. And people that are loyal, that will just do whatever he says and go along with the program.
Lack of competence was irrelevant. Loyalty was the answer. Decisions that were terrible, policy instability, and a judiciary that was tainted by politics were the results of this. When loyalty to a single individual takes precedence above competence and integrity, the basic foundations upon which the government is built begin to become unstable. After everything was said and done, Sonny Hostin offered a harsh condemnation of the hypocrisy that exists inside a system that has the potential to allow a convicted criminal to become the leader of the country.
Profoundly disturbed that the 14th Amendment of the Constitution did not prevent someone who participated in an insurrection from becoming president of the United States. I think that going forward, the convicted felon box on employment applications better be taken off, because if you can be the president of the United States, then you should not be prevented from employment in this country, because I remember applying for my jobs as a federal prosecutor, and there was a box for convicted felons. And so that box better be taken.
The level of ridiculousness is at its highest. As a convicted felon, the individual who is in charge of implementing the law is himself a criminal. How can we rationalize the fact that millions of average Americans are being forced out of their employment due to mistakes that were made in the past if the bar for the highest office is set so low. The fact that Donald Trump is still a viable presidential candidate despite having been convicted of criminal offenses in New York and having charges pending in other jurisdictions presents a challenge to the legal and political system in the United States that has never been seen before. The battle for the future of the United States of America is no longer solely about policy. The conflict centers on the question of whether or not there is such a thing as objective truth, whether or not our institutions are able to hold, and whether or not our fragile democracy can withstand this storm.